Good morning, everyone. Shavua Tov. We are on Parakeh, Mishna Daled, Chapter 5, Mishna 4. So the previous Mishnah was discussing not to sell grain that hasn't had Truma and Meiser taken from it to someone who we do not trust will separate Trumas and Meisers. So now the Mishnah continues. Lo yimkar adam es tivnai. A person should not sell his straw, ve'es giftai, nor should he sell the pulp of his pressed olives, ve'zagav, nor the skins of his pressed grapes, l'misha eneneman al ha'maisris, to someone who is not trusted regarding taking off meiser, lo ha'itzi mehen mashkan, if the purpose is to extract left. Now what that means is like this. When it comes to olives and grapes, I'm reading for you here from the bottom here in the notes. Even after olives and grapes are pressed to release their oil and wine, the pulp of olives and grapes still contains small amounts of juice. In our case, the buyer plans on extracting this juice. So you've got the leftover pulp, the leftover skins, and there's still some liquid in there that people would buy that leftover in order to extract more liquid from it. Okay. Regarding wheat is threshed to separate the inedible stalks, the straw, from the edible kernels. The kernels are then winnowed to remove the straw from the kernels. But even after the winnowing, some kernels are often left behind in the straw. So there would be people who would buy the straw to extract the leftover kernels. So if this is what's happening, this is why you're selling these things, whether it be the straw, the pulp, the skins. If they are being sold for the person who's going to extract the leftovers from them, then if that person is not trusted about separating meiser, you cannot sell it to him. Because as we said before, you cannot enable him to do a sin. V'mhaitzi, because if let's say he did, in these cases, where he bought it to extract, he did extract, chayiv meisris, he would be liable to separate meisris, the 10th. This is very specific now. Until now, the word meisris, tithes, can include truma and meiser. I've been careful to always say truma and meiser, but the word masris in general includes both. In this case, it's very specific. If the person were to go ahead and extract leftover kernels, leftover juice, and that was his plan, and he did it, he would be liable to separate meisris, which is why you cannot sell it to him if he's not trusted to separate them. Truma, but actually he would be exempt from separating truma. Why is that? Because when it separates truma, referring to the farmer who has completed his crop, before he sells it, he's going to separate truma. He's going to separate truma from it, and when he separates truma, his intention, his heart, his designation of truma is going over the kutayim. Kutayim means the stalks that were not threshed. That's what kutayim means. Stadim means the grain on the side, because as we learned previously, let's say by grain, the farmer makes a pile, smooths it over, and then separates trumas and meisers from that. But they're going to be stalks. Now, again, that pile is already from the grain that was threshed, but they're going to be stalks that didn't get threshed. They didn't get threshed properly. Some of them may have fallen off to the side of the pile. It kind of fell over to the side, and you didn't realize it till later. You don't pick those things up till later. Nonetheless, when you separate truma from this pile, your intention is for your truma to cover everything, the pile, and even what's not in the pile. Which would include, as the Mishnah says, the kutoyim, the stalks that were not threshed, the stadim, what fell to the side, and the kernels that are still left in the straw. You have in mind everything, and as brought down here in the notes, Taisus Yantiv, commentary of Taisus Yantiv says that even if you didn't have it in mind, the sages said it counts for that also. But generally, the point is a person has it in mind. Person has in mind that the shua is going to cover everything. and therefore it's covered when you sell it to this person. So this person, were he to extract, wouldn't have to be concerned about truma. But maisris, he does have to be concerned, because when it comes to the maisris, to the actual tens, that goes to the Levi, Meiser Sheni, those things, when he does that, his intention is on the pile, but not those other things. Not the extra, not the leftover juice or the leftover kernels. When he separates maisris, the maisris don't cover that. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because when you give a tenth of something, it's got to be exact. It's going to be exactly 1/10. The Torah says give a tenth of your crop. It's got to be a tenth. It can't be less than a tenth, and it should be more than a tenth. It's supposed to be a tenth. And therefore, you can't separate a tenth in advance of something that you don't know how much the tenth is going to be. You don't know how much liquid is still going to be extracted from the skins and from the pulp. You don't know how many kernels of grain there are left in the straw. And therefore, you cannot separate maisros from them until you actually have them. Truma, on the other hand, although there are amounts that the sages designated to separate for truma, 40th, the 50th, the 60th, nonetheless, you're not supposed to do it exactly. You're supposed to estimate it. If you're estimating it already, so then you could go ahead and estimate everything. And that's what we say a farmer does before he sells it. But since he can't cover all of it, so therefore, since truma covers everything, if you sell to someone the straw, the pulp, the skins to extract what's left over, truma you don't have to worry about. But maisros you do have to worry about, because the mice that the farmer took when he was separating from the pile doesn't cover those things that aren't there yet. And therefore, to sell these things, the straw, the pulp, the skins, to someone who is not trusted to separate maisros, you can't sell it to him. On the other hand, if let's say this guy said, I'm buying these things not to extract any liquid, people use them for fuel. People lit fires by them. If that's what he's planning on doing, there's no problem, because if you're not earned, then you don't have to separate shumas and maisros from it. And therefore, there's nothing to be concerned about. So therefore, the Mishnah says that if you are selling to a person not trustworthy regarding maisros, you're selling him these things that are still liquid or kernels to extract from, and he's buying it to do so, you cannot sell it to someone who is not trusted to separate maisros from. If he's not doing it for that purpose to extract extras, he's just using it for fuel for fire, no problem selling it to him, because in those circumstances, he doesn't have to separate anything from them. Okay, now the Chavetz Chaim, the laws of Lashon Harah. You know, this Sefer Chavetz Chaim, which the laws of Lashon Harah was written by the great tzaddik who was known as the Chavetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan. And this was the first work that he did when he put together all the laws of Lashon Harah. And this is how he became well known. And because this is the work that he put, it was his first work that made him famous, so to speak, it became that people referred to him as the Chavetz Chaim. But Chavetz Chaim is the name of this sefer, of this book that we're using as we study the laws of Lashon Harah. So now we're up to Halacha Gimel. This is chapter 1, paragraph 3. Previously we said, you speak derogatorily about a person, you transgress the prohibition, the Torah's specific prohibition not to do so, along with the potential to transgress many others. All this, even if it comes out occasionally he spoke badly about a person. It comes out, that sometimes you speak Lashon Hara about someone. When you do that sometimes, those sometimes that you do that, you're going to transgress the prohibition. But if, let's say, God forbid, a person has become habitual in this sin, like people who constantly get together to talk and tell stories. This is what so-and-so did. This is what his parents did. This is why I heard about him. And these are all words of putting down a person, of speaking negatively about a person. And these are people who habitually do so. These people, our sages, refer to them as Bali Lashon Hara, masters of Lashon Hara, owners of Lashon Hara. They own it. It's part of them. That's what they do. When their punishment is much greater. Because basically, they completely don't consider, they consider it completely insignificant, completely irrelevant. That means they took a prohibition of the Torah and they're just ignoring it. And they know they're ignoring it. And still they do it. That makes the sin much greater. The prophet said, Hashem should cut off those who their tongues speak great things, meaning large negative stories about other people. Amr Chazal, this is now paragraph 4. Our sages said, there are 3 sins that if a person commits them intentionally, he can be punished for it in this world and lose his portion of the world to come. Talking about a person, we'll see these very grave sins. Idol worship, Gilei Arayis, immorality, sinful immoral acts, specific types that carry that are talking about either a married woman, close relatives, ushvichas damim, or murder. These are 3 sins that potentially can bring a person punishment in this world and lose his portion of the world to come. Lashon hara neged kulan, and lashon hara is equal to all of them. Our sages bring proof to this from the scriptures. The lashon hara is equal to all of them. We're referring, this saying of our sages, the commentary say, is talking about someone who constantly does so. And they don't bother trying to stop themselves from it. Because in their minds, nothing wrong. Those are the people that their Lashon Hara can be, that their sin of speaking Lashon Hara could be equal to the 3 cardinal sins. A person, but we're not talking about a person. Let's say sometimes it comes, a person, there are people, lots of people try not to speak Lashon Hara, and just sometimes it happens that way. That's not what we're referring to. That is, again, that's a transgression of speaking Lashon Hara, and a person has to be careful not to come to that. But the severity that we're talking about here, in the previous paragraph, in this paragraph, only applies to a person who is a habitual speaker of Lashon Hara. Have a wonderful day. Shua Tov.